Well, good morning and welcome to 2019. And we have a lot to cover in our first council meeting of the year, so we'll call the meeting to order. And with us this morning is Reverend Kevin Graham of GCC Ministries to provide an invocation. And following that invocation, we will have a Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us for both of those. Reverend Graham, great to have you this morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Good morning, community, and Happy New Year. I know we have a lot of anxiety because of the agenda, but just be reminded that God is in control, and Happy New Year. Let us pray. God, we do thank you for this day you have made. We come to rejoice and be glad in it. Lord, we ask your blessings upon the council and the mayor as they make decisions on who is the next District 2 candidate to represent District 2 for the city, the next vice mayor, water rate increases. Lord, we just ask that you would guide them as they make those decisions and help the city to meet those needs and demands that are requested of them. We ask that peace would be in our city, that prosperity would be in our city. We ask that crime would go down, murders would cease, and we just ask for this city to be a city that is blessed of God. It's in the name of Jesus Christ we pray and ask it all. Let God's people say, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Here in a minute. So we have approval of the minutes of December 18th, 2018. Any changes or corrections? Seeing none, I would move that we approve those meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. We have one proclamation for human trafficking that the Vice Mayor is going to read this morning.
Good morning. Do we have anyone representing a group for this proclamation today? Would you like to come down and join us?
Yes, I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Combating Human Trafficking. Yeah. Sure, I can say quick something.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is a proclamation from the city of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870. Whereas human trafficking is a form of abuse and exploitation which involves the commoditization of human beings for both labor and sexual purposes, robbing individuals of their freedom, dignity, and right to self-determination. And whereas Wichita, Kansas is not immune to this horrendous crime, as vulnerable youth who are at risk to become victims of sexual exploitation, traffickers who exploit vulnerabilities, and buyers who drive demand all live in our community. And whereas Wichita has recognized and acknowledged human trafficking as an issue in our community and has led the way in efforts to combat human trafficking in the state of Kansas through multidisciplinary collaborations, community awareness, education, training, research, and policy development. And whereas Wichita State University, the Center for Combating Human Trafficking, and Mayor Longwell recognized the commitment of the Wichita community to educate and raise awareness about human trafficking and creating context in which prosperity and growth are possible for all. Therefore, now be it resolved that Jeff Longwell, Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, and the Wichita City Council do proclaim January 2019 as Human Trafficking Awareness Month and call upon businesses, national and community organizations, faith-based groups, families, and all Americans to recognize the vital role we can play in ending all forms of abuse and exploitation, like human trafficking, and to observe this month with the appropriate programs and activities. And here with us today is Karen Countryman Roseworm, apologize. I got through all those other multi-syllable words just fine.
That was great.
And I
Thank
screw
you.
up on your name. I apologize. So would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Thank you for this proclamation today. As Lieutenant Mayor said, it is January Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And we've made a lot of progress in Kansas over the last couple of decades. I have to say, we've changed laws, improved laws. Just in the last year, I will tell you that the Center for Combating Human Trafficking trained over 17,000 multidisciplinary providers across the country. We provided our prevention education programming to nearly 1,500 young people in our city, and we provide all of those services for free to our community with the support of our donors and with contracts that we do across the country. But despite all the progress, we have a lot of trouble going on still in our city and in our state. Perhaps some of you heard about Centoya Brown yesterday in the media, the young lady who was trafficked, and as a victim, she ended up, in order to survive, she ended up harming somebody else in that process to survive, somebody who was attempting to purchase her for sexual purposes. And how our country responded was to charge her as a trafficker. And while we talk a lot about combating human trafficking in our city and in our state, we are doing the same thing here every day. There's hundreds of Centoya Browns across the country, but there's at least a dozen Centoya Browns that we know of in our own state. And so I ask you all, as we think about human trafficking awareness, that we're not just talking about, yay, go out and charge the perpetrators, but how are we responding to the minor survivors that we are identifying? Are they just sitting in a juvenile detention facility, or are we offering them appropriate services? We have a couple young ladies in our state right now in which we've filed clemency for them so that they receive the services that they need. After all, they've been traumatized, they've been stolen, they've been sold by adults in our community. And it's time, it's well past time, that we respond to their needs. Thank you for this recognition today.
I know this is difficult, heart-wrenching work, and we thank you for all the service that you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Good job, Vice Mayor. Madam Clerk, you want to call the next item?
Ballot selection of vice mayor.
And all of us have received a ballot for voting purposes for the next vice mayor, which we have typically done every year by vote rather than by motion. But I will tell you that it has always been a rotational system that we've used, and sometimes we've gotten a little out of rotation for various purposes. But in the process of rotating vice mayor, Councilmember Bluebaugh is ready to serve again, and it's appropriate for him to serve again. And so as we consider the votes for vice mayor, I would tell you that Councilmember Bluebaugh is ready for that rotation.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'd be honored to serve the city as vice mayor.
So at this point, we're just simply asking you all to cast your vote for vice mayor, and the clerk will collect them and read them.
Mayor, it looks like I have 7 votes for Councilmember Bluebaugh.
Very good. So Councilmember Bluebaugh, we will administer the oath of office for your vice mayorship. Before we do that, if the Councilmember Fry, former Vice Mayor, will join me at the podium. So Councilmember Fry, for all of your service as being Vice Mayor this last year, we have something for you to remember that by. I will say this, that Councilmember Fry certainly stepped up to the plate and serving as Vice Mayor. It was a busy year this past year. I probably traveled more than I expected to travel, with multiple trips to Washington, D.C., among some other things, and he easily replaced me as I was on my travels and did an outstanding job as Vice Mayor. And so we thank you for your service. We thank you for your dedication. We know that you're still going to be available for many of those tasks as needed, but in honor of your year as Vice Mayor, I present you with this Keeper of the Plains.
Thank you, sir. I just learned the Vice Mayor handshake too late. I'm checking for a pulse.
Thank you.
All right.
You want to share here or up there?
No, I'm good. I just want to say thank you to staff, my fellow council members, and citizens for the opportunity to serve this year as Vice Mayor. It's been a tremendous honor. I've learned a ton, and I hope to continue to use that education and continuing service to the community. I firmly believe that we have seen our worst days and our best days are ahead of us. So thank you.
Thank you. If I could call Councilmember Bluebaugh to the podium, and if the judge will join us, and we'll do the swearing in of the Vice Mayor.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Jeff Bluebaugh,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States
that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of
and the
Kansas
Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and faithfully discharge the duties of Vice Mayor
and faithfully discharge the duties of Vice Mayor
for the City of Wichita,
for the
Kansas.
City of Wichita, Kansas.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. First off, I want to thank the mayor and the former vice mayor and all my colleagues for nominating me this morning. I'm very excited about serving as vice mayor. I've served as vice mayor under our previous mayor, and I've never served under Mayor Longwell, but with his leadership and the things we have going, the momentum of the city, I'm very excited about the trajectory we take. I've got to applaud our former vice mayor again. Vice Mayor Fry did a great job. I don't know that I'll be able to have the colorful suits that he had, but I'll try to bring up my dress a little bit. So thank you very much, and look forward to this new year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. You, no doubt, will do an outstanding job also. We have such a great council that we really don't have to worry. They have shared their leadership and dedication, and looking forward to you serving. Now, if I could call Councilmember Pete Meissner down to the podium. Councilmember Meissner has a presentation that he would like to make, and we'll turn the podium over to you, and then we'll provide some brief remarks after you're finished.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Hey, good morning, everybody. This is my last council meeting, and I wanted to say a couple of things maybe from the bench, and was reflecting on it, and then I realized that I was elected in April of 11, and at that time Manager Layton was here for about a year. Before that, Council Member Longwell was still here, and it was trying times at that time. 11 and 12 were very difficult times, and we kind of collectively challenged ourselves to respect the negative that was going on in the community, but to move forward to compete with the likes of the Tulsas, Oklahoma Cities, Omahas, whatever. And so with that attitude, it was been reflective of what we wanted to do. So I thought that I couldn't do it all by memory. So I've got a couple of slides I want to show you to see what we've done here in the past 6-7 years. We are no longer a small, sleepy community, and we truly are proud of being the 50th in the top 50 cities in the United States, and that's what we're acting like. And we're obviously the largest city in Kansas, and we are the leader in the economy of our state. So with that, and I've got a few thank yous to say, but I want to show you something. This is just some examples of where we were and where we've been. This is at Madison and Douglas. It's what it looked like back in 2012. And this is what it looks like today. You were able to get a chance. This is just one shop along the Douglas corridor. Some of you may recognize this picture. This was just a few years ago, looking across the river. And this is what it is today. So before, and just a few short years later, today. And imagine the paddle boats and all the other stuff that goes on the river. We didn't get that picture. This is an aerial shot. Either traffic engineers, you guys like this? Anyway, this is the overview of K96 and Greenwich, the infamous Starbond district. So that's what it looked like just a few years ago, and this is what it looks like today. I might point out that the Starbond district, if you look on the right, that's what it looked like just a few years ago. That's what it is today. If you look on the left side to the west of Greenwich Road, you see the vacant land there. That's not in the Starbond district. And again, the Starbond allowed us to take the sales tax from the new sales in that area and apply it into the infrastructure for a small period of time and a dedicated amount. Any business outside that, and all of this property tax, everything else still goes to the schools, to the county, to the city. So it's just the sales tax. But these businesses just to the west, if you look along the west side of Greenwich, those are not in the Starbond district. So those are all new just from that picture. Those are new businesses, new buildings, new development. Part of this Starbond completion of this task is the famous Stryker complex that we had underutilized for years, 20 years old. Thanks to a group, they built it and donated it to the city. We hadn't been using it. You can see it up in the upper left-hand corner. There's the fields and the stadium. Is that a drone going over the stadium? Anyway, so this is what the fields look like from the stadium. Man, this is as recent as last year, right, Scott? And this is what this is looking like today and what the future will be. Some of you people that live in College Hill, when I first was elected, College Hill was in it was in the District 2. Since then the census was adjusted. It's now part of District 1. But you might recognize that vacant field that was a part of the city project with some developers that was slow to move, and we put the gas pedal on that, and that's what it looks like today. Just 3 years ago, today. This is the Grand Hotel. It's another building just just east of Union Station. That's what it looked like just a few years ago. We were lobbied by many of us to preserve it and keep it and save it. You see part of the Union Station to be just to the right of the screen. And anyway, that's what this was what it is today. It's thriving, occupied. Before it was vacant and nothing, and now it's part of that Douglas Street there. Some of you may recognize this challenge that we had. It's a small project called a new airport. the hint was the Eisenhower there at the bottom of the street. Anyway, so you've all been there today, and we're very proud of that. We caught a lot of advice on this project. This was paid for by user fees on your ticket when you buy a ticket, paid for by parking garage and other fees. So if you use the airport, you're paying for it. If you don't use the airport, it's not taxpayer funded. We do guarantee the performance of the bonds on that in case if there's ever another 9/11 event and airports go silent for 2 or 3 months, then we would have a responsibility there. But it's paid for by the users, so it's a very proud project that we're all very, very proud of. And pretty soon, right now, actually, the building on the left is coming down. Just a couple more here. This is another one you might recognize. This was the corner on Douglas. There's a garage there on the left. We built that garage in hopes that this corner would be developed, and it was a big part of that. The downtown development group were a big part of helping us get this. That's what it looked like just a few years ago, and that's what it looks like today. The garage is prominent in this picture. The garage is still there, but it's no longer a part of that. There's the Wichita, the former Wichita Eagle, much larger than its needs were at the time, and obviously the big home run that we just celebrated was Cargill moving in, electing to stay here and making it their world protein headquarters. A big congratulations. This one was kind of interesting. The building, I can't remember the name of it, the building next to the pink building was a historic, supposedly save it. Marble panes were falling off the pink building. That's why there's sidewalk block to keep the citizens from getting hit with parts coming off of it. And today, it looks like that. Apartments are full. They're loving it. Young people, many young executives and young people are living there. And that's Law Enforcement Training Center. This is a school building that our city police and the Sedgwick County Sheriffs used to jointly train together for over 30 plus years. It was falling apart. It's a school, abandoned school that we used. It was a lot of discussion. We were fortunate to team with Sedgwick County on this. It was estimated to be $30 million, $15 million each, and we ended up getting this building for $10 million total, saving the taxpayers $20 million. And it's now on the Innovation Campus, so there's students there taking classes for law enforcement, so it's kind of serves as recruiting. That was a big step and a long-needed step to go from there to here, and we were very proud to get that accomplished. And there's another little vacant lot here that it was quite a chore that we went through, 10 years of discussion and a lot of dialogue about it. I was part of the dialogue that tried to make it, if we're going to do it, it needed to be better and bigger and better and better. And I think we're all very proud that we now have even a name change to the Advanced Learning Library. So that's what there was just a few years ago, and that's what is there today, and it's widely accepted. So with that, we showed a lot, and a lot of it was downtown. That's the core of every city, including ours. But all the other districts have had some great progress. You saw some of our District 2 progress, but District 4, and then we got the new baseball stadium. The Innovation Campus continues to be a huge success. Imagine that was just a golf course that was hardly played at and is now the center for innovation and attraction for places. Delano is going, the Dunbar Budding District is going in District 1. Splash pads in a beautiful park in District 5. Community investment, beautification businesses going in expansion in District 3. Record-breaking mural along in District 6. So anyway, we made a lot of progress. So there was a lot to go over, and I'm not one to brag, but As a matter of fact, I was one that said we should be bragging. We're the 50th largest city and the largest city in the state. So why aren't we bragging about that? That humility, that humbleness that we experience, because that's part of our nature. Well, in this case, we needed to brag some. I didn't cover things like Kellogg that hadn't been worked on in 25 years. It was worked on. West Kellogg's open. East will be open soon. Proud to say that we worked closely with our partners at the state and the federal, and we ended up remodeling that and saving over $50 million to the taxpayers on a very coordinated effort that was $50 million under the budgeted amount that first came out. I already talked about the law enforcement, saved $20 million. So aside from doing all this stuff, we're saving millions of dollars to the taxpayers. Didn't talk about the water reuse, the project that we did for Spirit that kind of assures them 20 years of reusing water, helps them, and you see the growth they announced, 1,000 employees last year, 1,400 more this year, and that's just one small part that assures them, and it's also it's responsible to our water system and our ecosystem to do that. I was glad that we worked on an after-hour ordinance, and I worked hard with Councilmember Bluebaugh to make sure that his cul-de-sac was exempt from that after-hours ordinance. But anyway, so with that, we're poised for the future. I just want to encourage this council. I want to thank everybody. I want to encourage this council to not be, there's this old saying, paralysis by analysis. And it usually refers to looking over a 3-foot putt on a golf course. But you can get paralyzed by analyzed. And I think we took some bold steps. Bold was a common word we heard, especially with the young people. Obviously, we've got completing projects, baseball, NAFSCR Park, Innovation Campus I talked about, the challenge we're going to have, water, the 50 years of the future, Century 2, performing arts, transit system. Do we think about going regional to help be a leader in that way? And I'd like to encourage, and then we got obviously the golf challenge and our aquatics challenge. I want to encourage this council and future council even consider things like expanding the term of a council member from 2 terms, 8 years to 12 years. We pass IRBs for 10-year periods, so the IRBs that they pass today will not be around when it's when their term expires. I think 12 years or 3 terms is plenty, and if the citizens don't like what the council member's doing, the citizens can vote them out. That happens all the time. I guess we should be proud that the President of the United States, the Governor of Kansas, and Wichita City Council are 3 groups that have term limits, and nobody else does, but that's all right. So I would encourage to expand that. So finally, I just want to thank you to my wife, Susie, and my family who've stood with me when we first got in this world 7 years ago. My friends and colleagues are way too many to thank. Obviously, the staff, I've enjoyed working with them. You do a fantastic job under the management of our great, I have a lot of respect for Bob Layton, our city manager. I've grown to be good friends with him, and he's a good one, and I want to thank you, Bob, personally. And so let's just focus, do the best thing to keep and attract young people, and I just want to allow the citizens to be able to do whatever they want to do to create whatever value they want to create and add to the value of our city. So with that, it's been a fun run. Thank you all. Thank you individually. So appreciate it.
So you confused Eddie Fonestock. He said, people think about a 3-foot putt? So Pete, we do have a very small gift for you to remember all of us by. All of the council members signed this. It's a plaque that shows a great picture of City Hall with the memorial in the front of that, and signifies your term as a council member, almost 8 years actually, just a few months short of 8 years. So thank you for your service, and before we move on to the next agenda item, we're going to let everyone share some remarks from the bench.
We could go to the next agenda.
No, we're not. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So, Councilmember Meister, that was an outstanding presentation, and in your tenure, obviously, you have a lot to celebrate, and it was hard to fit it all in, and we truly appreciate your service. I have some more remarks I'll share in a minute, but let's open it up for any remarks from the council members. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. The first thing I'd like to say.
It hurts.
Sorry.
Thanks for. That was good. That was good.
Pete, from day one, you've been there as a friend, as a mentor. You've helped introduce me to a lot of folks. You've helped introduce me to a lot of new ideas and opened up a lot of different areas that I hadn't thought about before. So I really appreciate your guidance. And, one thing I've noticed over about the last 4 years is we've been the guys on the ends. And even new council members, they come in and they say, we'll put you guys anywhere. You can have any seats you want, but you got to leave Blue Ball Meitzner on the ends because you got to keep them as far apart as possible. So I guess we're both moving on. You're moving across the street. I'm moving a couple seats over. So I'm looking forward to your leadership on the county commission.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate our friendship, and
Thank
good
you.
luck.
And, yeah, jump in there.
I'm going to echo a lot of things that Vice Mayor Bluebaugh just said. Pete's been an amazing confidant, teacher, leader, mentor. We share office space right next to each other, and so we have a lot of conversations every day, and so I've really relied on your strength and your passion for the city. Of course, I can't leave without digging at you a little bit, though, because you are our most senior member, and I know you're going across the street, and you have promised open lines of communication. So I know this is what you're used to. They are labeled city and county. But, Pete fancies himself a millennial, and so he does have a Pete's book face with all of our pictures so he can remember us all by. Keep that handy. You might need it.
Thank you.
And lastly, one of the things that Pete has done passionately and with extreme vigor is the Amtrak. Trying to get that back in Wichita, and so I put together a golden ticket for him that allows you unlimited rides on the Watson Park Tiny Train. But it does expire today. So, yeah. But you are welcome in District 5 anytime. Just meet me at the corner of Tyler and Ridge.
I know that corner well. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Any other comments?
Will that rope stretch through the tunnel?
Yeah, we'll work on it. Councilmember Clendenin.
Pete, interesting. You and I were elected at the same time. We came in together, and I will tell you, you have been a tremendous mentor to me. As a blue-collar machine operator coming off a floor, and you from the corporate world, kind of our worlds colliding. It was interesting. Even when campaigning, you really started to take me under your wing and talk to me, and we got to know each other, and really feel like we became pretty good friends. As a matter of fact, I cannot even express the amount of laughs that we've had in your office about some of the weird, horrible things you say. Not horrible in a bad way, but just you can't get words straight. You transpose them, and it's just so it's like Facebook or Bookface. But I was wondering there for a while. The only reason you really were keeping tabs on me is because I was your mom's council member for so many years. And the only reason I took interest in you is because of your lovely mom. But one thing I need to say in your presentation was very indicative of you and your service, is that there are very few times you took credit for things that you actually had your fingerprints all over. There are so many improvements and so many amazing things in this city that have been done that nobody will ever know, because you truly are humble, and you truly do care about the city and the success of others. And I think, to me, that was one of the most amazing qualities that you possess on this council. And I've learned a lot from that humbleness, and I will continue to operate in that manner as I move forward. Thank you so much for being a friend, a mentor, and wish you all the luck and best as you go across the street. Thanks, Pete.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor.
James, thanks for making me have to do a lot of thinking.
Yeah. Stop it, would you? Just stop it.
Thanks.
Pete, that's actually what I was going to say. I appreciate the times you've been thinking. But no, in this year of service, I've appreciated your wealth of knowledge, your honest advice, and just being able to talk through issues and gaining your perspective. I've appreciated it quite a bit. I haven't served with you as long as everyone else, but this year has been very eye-opening, and I appreciate all that you have given in our conversations that we've had, and the times when you were thinking. I'm sorry for making you think a few times.
Councilmember Clayco.
Thanks, Brandon. Good luck with everything.
Thanks.
Well, I can't really add anything. I agree with what everyone said, Pete. So I just want to thank you for your service to the city and your friendship. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just simply add to that I could have watched that presentation for another 4 hours, and you could have probably delivered it for another 4 hours. There were so many accomplishments in the last 8 years that it's hard to capture. You have to hit the highlights, and that's what we sometimes forget as a council, to celebrate the so many victories that we have, and we don't brag on ourselves, Pete, and you're a perfect example of that. And the nice thing is, we know we have some challenges, but then you get to be a part of those challenges in the future, because we're going to still count on you as a county commissioner. And we think that that's going to improve certainly our community. Wichita makes up almost 80% of the Sedgwick County, and you'll be a strong voice over there. And so we're looking forward to your leadership over there. Pete and I have a lot of history. Most people probably don't know that we both have sisters that were married to the same family of brothers. And so we're almost related. And we didn't even know that when he came into office. I mean, there's a lot of similarities besides the way that we part our hair. But truly, I have appreciated all that you've done. You have provided great opportunity for us to all think through the processes, because we haven't always agreed, which is, I will tell you again, a great thing. And it gets us to thinking in other ways. And so we appreciate what you brought to the table, and looking forward to working with you as you continue to lead this community in a slightly different capacity, but I think it will make us all stronger. So thank you very much for your leadership, your friendship, and all that you do for our community, and we look forward to what the next several years will be for all of us. So thank you, and I would let you make any finishing remarks if you would like.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and thank you all. What's rewarding about this has been the development of friendships with each of you and your spouses, and it's been. I think we've had a fun times as well, and the job gets kind of crazy sometimes, but it's nice to have share a laugh and a hug. So appreciate that. I meant to point out all those slides. We this idea that I came up with. I'm just the idea guy. Actually, Megan Lovely put this together with. I told her what I thought we wanted to try to do, and she did all of this. And so, Megan, I want to recognize you and thank you for not only this presentation that you helped me with, but also for all of you've done helping keep our office together. So, Megan, you're going to get a clap. Thank you. So, anyway, thank you all again.
Madam Clerk, you want to call the next item, please?
Andrew Crane, issues with the blind and visually impaired regarding transportation and new technology.
Give me just a minute while I get my guide dog situated here. Stay. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, City Council. I am Andrew Crane, member of the National Federation of the Blind and also founder and of Guiding Paws ICT, and here to talk to you today about new technology and getting more site access locations. I congratulate you on getting the airport site access location with IRA. Now, the next work is to get our City Hall government buildings all accessible with IRA and getting the Wichita Transit site access locations and getting everything rocking and rolling and making this city a site access location. Envisioned as already got their 2 buildings site access locations. Let's make it our city a site access location. And thank you very, very much. And also, the National Federation of the Blind is going to Washington, D.C. Legislative agendas on your guys' desk already. And we want to see lots of things getting done. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you for being a strong advocate for those that are visually impaired in our community, and we appreciate what you've shared.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next speaker.
Mary Catherine Vernon, making Wichita an environmentally green city.
Mayor Longwell, City Council members. My name is Mary Catherine Vernon. I've lived in Wichita District 6 for the last 9 years. We are in the midst of an environmental crisis, global warming, that threatens the survival of not only our species, but the survival of all life on Earth. We have seen footages of towns devastated by hurricanes and flooding, sodden piles of broken lumber and glass, twisted aluminum, torn insulation, a shoe, a doll's head. We have also seen footage of towns reduced to cinders and ash by firestorms. Thousands of people and pets died, and homes and possessions were lost. In Kansas, while our environmental disasters get little attention in the news, they are also catastrophic. There is a reason farmers have a higher suicide rate than any other profession. Unpredictable weather has made crop failure all too common. In November last year, the Wichita Eagle reported increasing temperatures and more extreme weather patterns such as flooding and drought will have serious consequences on crop and livestock production. At 1 degree Celsius, we are rapidly approaching the edge of the precipice. 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperature ranges. An article in The Guardian last September quoted Drew Schendel, a Duke University climate scientist, as saying, "A massive immediate transformation in the way the world's population generates energy, uses transportation, and grows food will be required to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. It is extraordinarily challenging to get to the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, and we are nowhere near on track to doing that. While it's technically possible, it's extremely improbable, absent a real sea change in the way we evaluate risk. We are nowhere near that." In 2017, the United States produced the most CO2 of any country at 15.53 metric tons per capita per year. Kansas ranks 15th in the United States in the most CO2 produced per capita, with 23.97 metric tons per capita, more by far than New York with 8.61 metric tons per capita, or California with 9.26 metric tons per capita. According to the EIA, the majority of Kansas CO2 emissions comes from the burning of coal and natural gas for the production of electricity. The use of diesel fuels for buses, freight trucks, and trains only adds to that. Although the City Council has approved a grant to replace 6 of our 60 diesel buses with electric buses, and that will help reduce the city's carbon dioxide emissions, it is not nearly enough. If we are to do our part in reducing CO2 emissions, we must do much more as quickly and efficiently as possible. I propose the following: that we do not wait for our current diesel burning buses to wear out before replacing them with electric buses. Instead, replace all the remaining 54 buses in the next 5 years. In addition, to produce clean electricity for our homes, businesses, and buses, we must eliminate coal and natural gas as fuel for electric power plants. Boulder, Colorado, and several other cities around the country have taken over corporate-owned electric utilities and made them public-owned so that they can better control the means of generating electricity. We could follow their example and do the same. You may say that 54 new electric buses are too expensive or too much trouble. But I ask, is a new stadium at $75 million a better value than 54 electric buses at $64 million when the 54 buses could help save the planet? There are many choices to make. I hope you will make the right ones. We don't have much time left to save the planet. 12 years. It will go by fast. My hope is that you will begin now to place the fate of the people and the earth above all else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And appreciate you sharing. Now is probably a good time to share some other good news that I just learned last week talking about the same topic that often doesn't get shared with the public in a way that it should, besides the new Cargill building that was very deliberately and intentionally built with conservation in mind and green building techniques. We have the largest non-aerospace manufacturer in the city of Wichita that shared with us last week that within 2 years they will be 100% on renewable energies, and that's Johnson Controls. So it's pretty impressive for corporate America to go and take on those kinds of tasks on their own, and certainly we're proud of Johnson Controls and what they do in our city, but for them to share that they will be 100% on renewable energies is pretty impressive for the largest non-aerospace manufacturer in the city of Wichita. Madam Clerk, next item.
Consent agenda items 1 through 30.
Are there any items to be pulled for discussion or clarification? Councilmember Fry.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 11.
Any other items? All right, seeing no other items, I move that we approve consent agenda items 1 through 30 with the exception of item 11.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Cast your vote. And motion passes 7-0. On item 11 that deals with the sale of some property, and I know that you have some questions. I think Councilmember Blueball has some questions that we would like to research at this point. Do you have a motion?
Other than, I think where you're heading. Yeah.
So at this point, I would, let's defer that item 11 for 1 week. We can bring it back next week so that we can try and revisit some concerns that we have. So motion is defer 1 week.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Councilmember White, sir.
Mayor, I was involved in this. This is one of the projects on East Kellogg, and we had a proposal that honored the price that we put out there, and the proposal came through the listing agents, and Mr. Hatfield is the person that would like to purchase this property. I won't be here next week, and so out of respect to whatever the future council may decide, I am in favor of honoring this listing and announcement. But more so, I don't know if Mr. Hatfield, he lives out of town. He's here today, and I'd like to invite him to at least address what he wants to propose to put in the buildings on the purchase. If I could invite him to come up, if that's all right with the council. Mr. Hatfield, would you like to? And I've personally not met Mr. Hatfield other than just a brief meeting this morning, and so. But I thought it might be a good idea for him to explain what he would like to do with this building.
All right, I appreciate a few minutes to explain what we want to do. So just a quick history. We currently own a wheelchair accessible van business location in Wichita. We own 2 more of those locations, one in Columbus, Kansas, one in Lee Summit, Missouri. Our company owns 4 auto dealerships and 2 motorsports stores, one in Frontenac/Pittsburgh, Kansas, one in Joplin, Missouri. So the reason we're here is you had a local motorsports business go out of business in the last few months, closed its doors. So we were contacted by both Honda Motor Company and Kawasaki Motorsports Company to investigate opening a location in Wichita to replace them, because they have a lot of customers that need service, and obviously they want to sell new products in the market. So that's the reason we're here. So then we began looking for some property around Wichita to locate in. The previous location was going up for auction, and we weren't prepared to try to buy that, and we didn't really like the location. In looking, we came up with the property in question, and typically auto dealerships don't make great motorsports locations. This one's laid out to where it can work. We still would not have been able to utilize the small building, but the smaller one. But in looking at it and reviewing it both with our motorsports manufacturers and our wheelchair van manufacturers, the smaller building will work great for the mobility business. So that business serves people with disabilities, people that can't walk. So what that building adds for us is a place to get people in and out of their vehicles in climate-controlled environment. Allows more showroom space. Really allows those people to stay indoors the entire time. We either they're looking at what they're wanting to purchase, or whether they are getting service. So here's what we plan on bringing to the community immediately. That's the business plan. We plan on employing an additional 30 people immediately between the 2 locations. We'll probably drive, based on the 2 motorsports locations we have and what we do now, an additional $300,000 a year in sales tax revenue, and that will grow. Our experience has been that, year one, it takes a while to get started and gain traction and then grow from there. We're obviously going to be paying sales tax. We've not asked for any tax incentives of any kind. We're in this completely with our own money, both for the property and the business. The buildings that you currently own are special use. So, my experience has been I own 4 of them as special use properties. There's very few industries that can use them. It just happens that both of these 2 industries, I can make use of them. And we've gone through a lot of work to get to where we're at, and we're ready to close immediately.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. So you'd be creating and it's, did I understand this would be a destination, what you're selling in there would also be attractive
for both industries, both the wheelchair accessible van business right now, that's 1 to 3% of the population. So those people, there's very, very few businesses in that, there's very few dealers in that business that do what we do. So there's 3 in the state of Kansas, primarily. We're one of them, or really 2 of them, 2 locations. So they come from, we have people out of Colorado, we have people from Nebraska, we have people from Oklahoma that do business in Wichita right now with that business. Our motorsports business in Frontenac, we do business out of Kansas City, we do business close to St. Louis, Missouri, out of Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's definitely a destination business. You're definitely going to see traffic. You're definitely going to see people come into town for the weekend to buy their motorsport item, load it on a trailer, take it home, which means they're going to spend money in the city. That's what we do. We see it at both of our locations now, and they'll come to town, pick up their unit, make a mini vacation out of it. So there's a lot of additional revenue for the city and other restaurants and hotels possible.
Okay. Thank you. Unless anybody has any questions for Mr. Hatfield.
I don't think so.
Nope. Thanks for explaining.
Thank you.
With that, unless we have a problem with the process of listing the property and selling it, and we listed it at a price. This is an offer that came in below that, but then he increased his price to the offering price, and then under what we've experienced, over the last few years is trying to build the integrity of our city and our processes. And if there was a problem with the process, then I wouldn't mind object to deferring. But if this was the process and we're attracting an out-of-town person to move a business here, that I don't have anything to do with the business personally at all, but out of the integrity of that, I'm going to make a substitute motion that we approve this agenda item.
Second.
We have a substitute motion and a second for approval of this property. And I'm not, at this point, I have multiple concerns, so might as well share them now then if we're going to vote on the substitute motion first, which is the way we have to do that. How much did the city pay for the temporary easement that we had to capture for the building of the highway?
John Philbrick, Real Estate Administrator. The city paid $7.8 for the total property. $5.8 of that was for the easements that were needed for the highway, both temporary and permanent. The additional $2 million got us the surplus property that we're discussing the sale of.
So how much just for the temporary easement?
I would have to take a look. I don't know that those were split out on this piece of property.
So what was the size of the temporary easement versus the size of the other easement?
Let me find the initial approval from back in 2014. It does not have those numbers. You've got them there.
You have 33,341 square feet were taken from the site for the improvements necessary for the interchange, and then another 34,270 square feet for the temporary easements.
So temporary easements as large as the regular easement?
They're about the same.
So then are we fair to say the temporary easement then cost us about $2.5 million?
No, because the temporary easement would have been figured as a percentage of the land value over time. It's basically a lease. The temporary easements have ran. They're termed because we're done with the project on that site. So basically those are done. Also, the acquisition included not only land from this parcel, but the parcels to the east. And so we have some additional ownership off of the body shop and the undeveloped land.
That we're hanging on to?
Yes.
How much land is that?
I would have to get you the exact details, and the numbers that the mayor gave, or the manager gave you, was the total of the 3 tracks, because it was a single ownership.
So my point is, it would be nice to see what we purchased in total land acquisition, what we're selling today, what we are still eventually going to give back in terms of temporary easement, what that temporary easement means in terms of value to the property. So when we talk about process, I don't know that we've ever used this process before. Have we hired an outside entity to sell our property in the past?
Yes, we have. We did it on the remnants at Town East that were left over from the Kellogg Rock Road project. We did it with the sale of the surplus land at Furley, and we did it several years back when we sold the old Executive Inn at Kellogg and Broadway.
So how did we go about selecting who was going to sell the property? Was that an RFP process?
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was, and the council approved the selection of Wygant.
And
just a reminder, this idea of using commercial broker actually came from the council a number of years ago. There was a feeling that we were not getting fair value for some of our sales, and so the council encouraged us in what you could, I think at the time, you as a council talked about unique circumstances, and especially parcels that had greater value, that we should use commercial brokers, or at least experiment with the concept of commercial brokers.
And then how did we come up with the $2.4 million value or price that we set?
The list price was arrived at through looking at the proposals we received from various brokers and the interviews that we had with the brokers to select the listing broker. And then the $2.4 million list price was approved as part of the approval of the listing broker and the listing agreement.
Because I received, and I'm guessing the city received also, an offer of $2.4 million before we ever listed this property from the plumbers and pipe fitters.
Well, the property was listed, and the listing broker brought the proposal from the plumbers and pipe fitters. But
I'm saying they shared that offer with me before we listed the property.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the timing. I will, just for full disclosure, that wasn't the true value of the offer. If you remember, it was 2.4, but it was on a discounted basis. So the true value was about 1.7, I think, if I remember, because they wanted a contract sale over a long period of time.
Yeah, but again, those are negotiable items, right. And obviously, as you have shared, the crazy thing is all of these issues that we talk about, to protect the city's interest, we can only talk about in a public meeting, which makes no sense to me, because there's multiple issues I have, and I think some issues that some others have regarding what are we giving away at this point in time. And obviously we are going to pay some fees to a broker to sell this property, but more importantly, and I've talked to some commercial real estate brokers recently that have shared, why are we selling this property now when the road's under construction, when you have a temporary easement that you had to pay money for in place still that devalues that property? That's why we buy temporary easements, because it devalues the property. If it doesn't devalue the property, we need to quit paying for temporary easements. So we're selling property while it's devalued. And they said the same thing. Why are you selling it today when it's probably at its lowest price while the construction's going on Kellogg? And that was part of my concern. But any other concerns?
John?
Yes.
John, could you tell us the condition of the buildings? I understand they're in somewhat disrepair.
Well,
need some maintenance.
The buildings, especially the larger building, need some work. There is some issues with the roof. There's been some vandalism to a couple of the air conditioning units, and as they remain vacant, vacant buildings age quickly, and so the improvements. The north building is in pretty good shape because it was occupied up until June by Davis Moore. But the southerly building needs some significant work on it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Claycomb.
So I have a couple questions. So if I understood, Mr. Hatfield, you're going to use these buildings that are there, correct? And renovate them? Okay. Thank you. And John, did you say we're finished with the temporary easement there?
On this property, the work for the highway is done. The temporary easement is no longer.
So we're finished with it. We're not using it anymore. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
The work on the highway is done right there?
On that site, on the physical site, yes.
Okay. It seems to me there's tremendous work left on the highway right there. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, we have a substitute motion to accept the offer. Cast your vote. And the motion fails. So now we will vote on the motion to defer 1 week.
No.
It passed.
Oh, did it?
Pass.
Oh, I'm sorry. 5-2?
Yeah.
All right. Motion passes 5-2. All right, Madam Clerk, next item.
Board of Bids and Contracts.
Morning, Mr. Mayor and City Council Member Hannah Lang, Department of Finance. Today I present to you the Board of Bids from the January 7th, 2019 meeting. The first bid that we have is the Madison Water Main Replacement. Recommended award is Wilkes Underground for $90,681. The next bid we have is Water Valve Replacement at McLean and Exposition. Recommended award is Donlinger & Sons Construction for $938,847, subject to City Council approval of new engineer's estimate and budget authorization on January 15th. Next bid we have is Water Distribution System to serve Bay Country Edition. Recommended award is Dutton Construction for Group 1 of $36,137.50. Group 2, Lateral 46, recommended award is $40,987.40. The next bid we have is Remodel and Renovate Office at 332 Riverview. Recommended award is Compton Construction for a base bid of $248,300. Next bid is the Recessed Vehicle Lifts. Recommended award for Group 1, Central Marketing Incorporated, for the base bid of $82,946 with a deduct for option 1 of $5,000. Group 2 recommended award is PB Hoydale Company for a base bid of $112,060.25, and option 1 is a deduct of $1,000. Last bid that we have is a repair and replace of sludge press screener for Plant 2. Recommended award is Huber Technologies for $70,249.10. And that is all the bids. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions or concerns on any of the bids? I would move that we accept the award of bids.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. And the motion passes 6-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
2019 water and sewer rate adjustments.
Good morning, Ben Nelson, Public Works and Utilities. Today we're recommending approval of water and wastewater increases of 4.9%. This is unfinished business. We had presented an initial rate increase proposal of 7.7% in November. At that time, you shared some concerns you had regarding generational equity on our large infrastructure investments. The goal of some of the rate plans that we'll show today, as well as kind of a finalist rate approach that we'll share, is that when we make large infrastructure investments like treatment plant projects, that the people who benefit from those in years from now are the ones who ultimately end up paying for them. I do want to remind you all that every year we usually come to you with rate increases. We have a set of what we call our baseline rate increases. This is to support a set of baseline CIP projects. These are normal replacement, rehabilitation of various utility assets. These are things like our annual water and sewer main replacement programs, equipment upgrades and replacement at, for example, our high service pump station known as HES that pressurizes the water in the distribution system, lift station upgrades on our wastewater system. So just normal operating and utility needs for 10 years. It totals about $450 million over the next 10 years in our CIP, and these are the baseline rate increases we've shown previously for those. But on top of our baseline CIP projects, we also have two very significant projects in the next 10 years that are going to drive rates. The first is the proposed water treatment replacement project known as the Northwest Water Treatment Facility. It's estimated at $524 million and will be completed in the next 5 years. After that, we have something called Biological Nutrient Removal Project, or what we sometimes call BNR. That'll be required for us to meet higher levels of nitrogen and phosphorus removal from treated wastewater. That's expected to cost about $355 million. So both of those projects are in addition to our normal baseline CIP. What we showed you in November is the blue line on this chart, and that was a gradual ramping down of rates over a 10-year period in order to pay for all of those infrastructure needs. Since the November meeting, we also looked at, we developed 2 additional options, but they're all contained within a 10-year rate window. That's the orange line, which is a gradual ramping up of rates over a 10-year period, and then a more levelized approach, which is the purple line, where rate increases would fluctuate between about 6.5% or 7%, so pretty steady for 10 years. We also, though, wanted to try to figure out a way to push the rate increases beyond the normal 10-year planning window. And what would allow us to do that is a change of financing mix that we assumed for our BNR project. When we did utilities optimization a year or so ago, one of the conclusions was that for our water treatment plant, we figured out the optimum mix of financing is what's called WIFIA, the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, and state revolving loan funds. Both of those pair a very low cost of interest with a delayed repayment that pushes some of the costs out beyond or after the projects are completed. That's not something we normally have available to us with traditional revenue bonds. So for what's a little bit less conservative of an approach, but something that's a good target for us, is to try to secure WIFIA and SRF for our large BNR, our large wastewater treatment project as well. And if we're able to secure that kind of financing, we would be able to delay some of the rate increases from what you saw in November out as much as 7 years, and it would keep rate increases at or below 5% through 2034, actually for the foreseeable future. Again, it's a little less conservative. As of late October, WIFIA had only been authorized through 2021. Our BNR project is scheduled to start in 2024, so there's a gap that we'd somehow have to manage. We also don't know, because WIFIA's got a very short program history, whether the EPA, which administers WIFIA, would be willing to provide more than one loan at a time, because conceivably we'd have a WIFIA loan on our water plant and then also be pursuing one on our wastewater plant. So that's one risk associated with it. And one other risk not related to WIFIA or the SRF financing is we do have to make sure that the costs of those 2 treatment plant projects come in at or below the expected estimates as of today. So there's some unknowns right now, but where we're at, we're comfortable recommending the 2019 rate increases that are shown in what that gray line approach is in front of you. That's the 4.9% increase. If approved, it would raise an average residential bill by about $3 a month for both water and wastewater utility costs. Our rates would remain competitive with the 50 largest cities. We would still have a much lower rate than most of those cities in the U.S. And the final thing I would leave with is that the action today, if approved, would only authorize that first round of increases. Future council action would be needed and to enact any of the future increases for now beyond on that gray line. And at that time, hopefully, we'll have better information regarding WIFIA availability, as well as what the guaranteed maximum price would be on the water treatment plant. And that concludes the presentation.
Any questions at this point? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. And I appreciate the work that you've done to this point to get it from an 8% increase down to a 5% increase. But I'm still not comfortable with a 5% increase. I'd like to work with staff to see if we can't adjust both of those, the dotted line, and change the trajectory of that slightly to make up some gaps, and push that out potentially a little bit, and adjust obviously the total rate increase and look out going 30 years potentially instead of 20. The reality is, at least on both, if we look at the new water treatment facility, we're probably looking at, if everything works out, probably close to 5 years before it's designed and built.
Correct.
And then we don't even have to start making the WIFIA payments for another 5 years.
That's correct.
So we're out 10 years basically without having to sell bonds at that point. And so at that point, if we just use 20-year bonds, which are pretty reasonable, gets us out 30 years. And so before I'm comfortable with voting on this, I'm going to defer this again until we can take a look at adjusting those rates potentially, so that we can, again, focus on, and you said it, that generational equity, and see how we can pare that out even further because of some of the delays that we'll have. And then I have some questions with staff that I would like to ask about what's in the current increases, and can we adjust some of those a little bit on a different trajectory to pay for some of those further on the back end instead of so much on the front end. I get it, we need to be aggressive, and we've got to pay for infrastructure that probably should have been started 20 years ago. I get all of that. But I just don't want to put that burden on one generation. And we've got to figure out a way to balance our needs with the generation right now that, quite honestly, won't see much of a benefit. And so I still have a lot of questions and would like to see if we can adjust some of that. Councilmember Meitzner?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. That's a unique, or it's a good thought, stretching it 30 instead of 20. But my question for clarification, so there's this assumption that we don't have to pay anything for the first 10 years, but isn't there WIFIA is only 49% financing, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So WIFIA covers 49% of the financing cost. So basically half of the project we wouldn't have to start paying anything on until 2028 for the water treatment plant. So the mayor's correct. There's when we're doing the 5 years of construction and design, then we have up to 5 years after that until we have to start paying a dime on the WIFIA loan. State revolving loan fund, which makes up the other half of the water treatment plant, there is a shorter delayed repayment period that once we start taking state revolving loan fund money, which could be around 2020 with the water plant, then after the first draw on the state revolving loan fund, there's a 2-year clock that starts, and then after that 2 years is when we start paying on the state revolving loan fund, but based only on what we have taken initially on that first draw.
But we could adjust what's in the current CIP for water and sewer and not take the state revolving loan in 2020 and delay that.
Mayor,
Because our costs aren't enormous the first couple of years.
There are really two main issues I think we're dealing with. One is the 2019 rates and what's necessary to get us through 2019. And that's something you and I have spent some time talking about. And then probably we've spent more time talking about the long-range planning. And I'll stay with the second first, and that has to do with probably the two ways to adjust this pro forma is either to change our assumptions on CIP projects going forward. And maybe that's a matter of slowing them down, changing the mix, evaluating or reevaluating what we've had in all of our assessments going to this period of time, and understanding going into it the consequences of that. The other piece of it has to do with the length of the debt, and I think you talked about that. And of course, that's a two-edged sword. It does stretch the debt service over a longer period of time and it gets back to that issue that I think the council talked about on generational equity. But it does come with a price. And I asked staff to take a look at, we have a 20-year issue that we're talking about issuing this year. If we took that out to be a 30-year issue, it adds up almost $12 million to the cost of that issuance, as you would imagine, because you're paying that interest, a higher interest rate for the 30-year period. 30-year bonds will actually carry a higher rate than the 20-year bonds. So we'd have to go in just with our eyes open, understanding that the total cost will increase, but it'll be spread over a larger customer base or a customer base over a longer period of time. And that's, I think, a great policy discussion to have. And what I'd like to do is have the opportunity to spend time this year going through those alternatives with the council. I also want an opportunity to talk to Springstead, who does our financial advisory work, who also works with rating agencies to talk about what happens, what are the consequences of going from 20-year to 30-year debt for our underground utility work, not just for the plants. So the plants, I think we know we're in a good environment going with 30-year debt where necessary. So I agree with the mayor, and I think if the council would like to explore the different alternatives on what we should be doing going forward that will help them set the stage for 2020 and in the following years. I feel pretty comfortable in terms of the way the debt is shown in our pro forma right now, given what we know about our WIFIA and revolving loan fund for the water plant. We're making some big assumptions on the sewage treatment or sewer treatment plant. That brings me back to this year and 2019. There's only two ways to impact that. One is to adjust the debt that we have scheduled to be issued this year. And we had two bond issues scheduled for 2019. And after the mayor and I talked some more yesterday, I asked staff to take a look at the impact of delaying one of those issues and actually pushing it into 2020. We could do that. That would take us then to an adjusted rate from where we are now at about 4.9 or 4.85 down to about 4.14. And we should be okay unless we have a significant emergency, and then that would require a cash contribution that's not anticipated. But I think we can stage projects accordingly and not sacrifice the CIP if we then, because we typically only have one issue, but we had to double up this year because of what we had planned for our capital improvement program. So that's one way to change the rate. The other is to not do some of the projects that are in the CIP. And if that's the council's wish, then we probably would need to go back and regroup and determine what the consequences are of delaying some of those projects.
But the CIP you're talking about, it's just the water and sewer CIP.
Water and sewer, correct.
I think it's good for the public to realize that this is an enterprise fund, which means it doesn't hit the general budget. This is only the users and ratepayers. This is a simple balancing act. The water is delivered, and the people that drink water and flush toilets are the ones that are paying for it. So this is nothing, it's outside the city's budget. But the CIP projects you're talking about would be internal to the water and the sewer system.
That's correct. Those that are scheduled for 2019. And again, a reminder, this rate increase this year only is to pay for existing debt service on past projects as well as the projects that we take on this year. And so that's the other way to adjust, is to adjust those projects. we always, since over the last 6-7 years, we have given you longer-term projections because I felt the council didn't have that information when it was being asked to make rate increases or rate changes in the past, prior to that time. So I wanted to have a full disclosure. But what it does is it gives you an idea about where we would go if we follow the program as designed today. You always have the ability, and that's what the long-range planning would allow us to do, to adjust those assumptions and adjust projects going forward.
So we can drop the rate down to 4.14 with really just a very slight adjustment at this point.
At this point, you wouldn't be adjusting projects in theory, right? You would
Right.
simply be delaying a bond issue until 2020.
Right.
And the only impact we would have is that we probably would have to adjust, should we run into a cash problem created by an emergency similar to the one we had a few years ago.
Sure.
If that's the case, then we could have probably, we would hope still be able to handle that through an adjustment of capital projects. It'll put us behind our schedule, but at this point, I think we can make that work.
So the nice thing is, and we don't know what the future holds on some of these projects, we have heard that potentially we may be a little too conservative on the cost of some of these large projects in terms of dollars. I can remember just a couple of years ago when we saved $25 million on one force main project. And so I think there's some potential in there to save some money on some of these future projects also, which would impact the rates tremendously.
Well, and we'll never, we also don't know what the interest rate climate will be, right? We had anticipated a little more significant rate for 2019 than what I think we're going to experience, and that's probably another reason I could delay that issue that was scheduled for this year.
Councilmember Clendenin.
I think if we know one thing is that interest rates are going up, and so we need to be very cognizant of that in the future. The other thing, I just want to say, I can hesitantly get behind a lower increase right now, the 4.1, I think, that we're talking about. But there are so many years that we've deferred maintenance and deferred maintenance and deferred maintenance. And I remember when I was first elected to this council, a third of my calls were about water main breaks and about service interruptions and about, I mean, it was horrible. We decided to step up and do something about it, and it's gotten tremendously better. So any decision we make, either now or in the future, that defers any CIP projects, I'm going to have a hard time supporting. But I can probably at least end up supporting a smaller increase. Now, nobody wants to pay more for their water. If there's one thing that we do when we raise rates, we raise them on ourselves as well. Just a few comments I had and ideas and thoughts. Thanks.
Councilmember Claycomb.
And I just want to add to Councilmember Clendenin's comments also. So when we started this process, the original staff recommendation was 7.7%. So we've worked really hard to bring that down because we were looking at almost an 8% increase. And so I think I, like Councilmember Clendenin, could get behind the lower 4.14%, knowing that we've worked to really analyze that rate and bring it down for the ratepayers.
Okay. Any other comments?
I have a question, Mayor. So is this rate increase we're talking about just for this year?
Yeah, just this 1 year.
Not the long-term 20, 30-year plan?
Right, with the understanding that we will engage the council in multiple discussions through workshop or something to talk about long-range alternatives.
Can we defer this 1 week so the new council member can vote on it?
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Bob, one quick question on that bond project that might get pushed off. Is that something that has been needed for quite some time, or is that something that we can really push off and it won't be a big issue?
Right, this would be the issuance of debt, not a specific project itself. Okay. And I think we can maintain the integrity of the 2019 projects, even with the deferral of the issuance of this debt.
Okay, thank you.
So if there's no other questions, then I can live with a 1-year rate adjustment, although it's difficult. And I don't know that the community understands how much we truly fight for them on these kind of rate adjustments and generational equity. And we don't want to put our community in a position where many of them are struggling just to put a roof over their head, burden them with higher ongoing utility bills. And as I mentioned to the manager just this past week, we have almost 15,000 households in this city today. 15,000 households today that are paying over 50% of their monthly income just to put a roof over their head. And then you burden them with additional higher rates. It's difficult. And I think I heard the figure of somewhere close to the area of 30-some thousand households that pay over 30% of their monthly income just to put a roof over their head. And so when we talk about the impacts that $3 or $1 makes, it can be traumatic to a lot of households. And so we're cognizant of that. And it's not just me, the entire council is cognizant of it. We probably get more emails on a $1 water rate increase than we get on anything else in the time that we operate representing this community. And so we are very careful. And so I do want to see us look at making some adjustments on some of that debt load, and we can sit and talk about it, Bob, how we can phase potentially some of that in places and try and create more generational equity where it's feasible, where it doesn't impact as much. Maybe we stagger, maybe we don't take all of the bonding in 2020 and we pay some of that with other financing opportunities. We can take a look at it. And so at this point in time, you're saying that you can get by with a 4.14 rate increase. I would move that the City Council approve a combined rate increase of 4.15 rate adjustment for 2019 and place the ordinance on first reading and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and then I just reiterate that I'll encourage all of the council members and certainly myself to sit down with staff to see if there's other innovative adjustments that we can look at making without jeopardizing the need to build our infrastructure. This council has not been shy about building infrastructure. It's the reason why we sold the Hyatt, so we could put more money in infrastructure in this city. And this council's been raising rates, not like we wanted to, so that we could build that mostly horizontal infrastructure. And I would say that they've done a pretty darn good job of doing a lot of catch up of almost 20 years of delays. And we don't get much credit for that. We probably get more grief than credit, but I get it that we have to make those investments in our community. So if there's no other questions or comments, cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
Wichita Ice Center Chiller Replacement Project and Public Exigency Approval.
Yeah. Hey, before you start, I do want to mention, because I just noticed they missed Pete's incredible hour-and-a-half presentation, but we do have a couple of county commissioners here, Chairman David Dennis and County Commissioner Unruh is in the room too, in the back of the room. Did I miss any other? Mr. Unruh, we are going to miss your service, and I'm going to be out of town tomorrow. I would certainly be there, but I want to say thank you for your 78 years of public service. It seems like only yesterday, but you have been an outstanding public servant and tremendous asset for this community. And so we thank Chairman Dennis and Commissioner Unruh. And I would pause at this point and ask the council if they were willing to take a off the agenda item up and allow either one of them to share any remarks if you would like to. Is there a second?
Oh, here he comes.
So do we need to vote on so I would make a motion that we take an off-agenda item up.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Now, do we need a motion to allow them to speak? All right, so we'll take a pause, and Commissioner Unruh, thanks for being here, and we'll let you share some remarks. As I mentioned, you missed Councilmember Meitzner's great presentation.
Well, Mr. Mayor and council members, thank you for the opportunity to make a comment. I'm somewhat ambushed. I came over here to watch the proceedings and see how you all were going to move forward with the decisions that you have to make today. But thank you for an opportunity to express my appreciation in my 16 years of service for the great relationship I've had with the City Council, current City Council, and those that went before you. I thought that we, from my perspective, worked well together. We've had a couple of bumps in the road, and we together worked our way through those to what I think provide good decisions for our constituencies. But I appreciate the current environment of progress and success that the City Council is now enjoying. It seems like a lot of good things are happening, and the City Council or the County Commission is proud to be partners with you. But thanks for the opportunity for me to express my appreciation to my constituents, the city and the county, for an opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Unruh. Councilmember Meissner.
Hey, Dave, I just want to thank you from this side of the bench. Thank you for what you've done. And when I'm replacing your seat, and it'd have been a lot easier if you put the bar really low for me to get over. But you've established a very high success rate and very high contribution to our community. And I only hope I can kind of fill the shoes a little bit. So thank you.
Well, Pete, thank you, and or Mr. Councilman, thank you. I mean, we're friends, and I'm pleased that you're coming over to stand in my stead, and look forward to observing how you move our community forward.
Hey, I won't be afraid to wrestle the new commissioner like I was afraid to wrestle the old one.
Well, I don't wrestle much more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chairman Dennis, did you want to share anything? Are you good? All right, thank you. And Chairman Dennis, thank you for being here, and certainly appreciate you too. And so now we will move back to our regularly scheduled agenda item. Thank you, Madam Clerk. You want to share it one more time?
Wichita Ice Center Chiller Replacement Project and Public Exigency Approval.
Mr. Mayor, council members, Joe Pager, Public Works and Utilities. I feel like I got a little iced out there. I was ready to go, and you called the timeout, and now I'm back on the field, and I hope I don't hit the upright and the crossbar.
Penalty box.
I'm here to talk to you this morning about a project at the Wichita Ice Center that involves the refrigeration unit for the ice for the 2 sheets on the rinks at that center. In July of this year, we had a system failure of the refrigeration system, and while most people have experience with refrigeration systems and HVAC systems on a residential scale, on a commercial facility like this, the system's quite a bit more complex. And on this slide, you can see some of the activities that we've been about. In the first 8 days after the late July failure of the system, we identified that we were going to have to make improvements or replacement of the system. That showed us that the outage of those ice sheets was going to be extended. And as a result of that, we went through with a public exigency to bring a temporary chiller in to bring 1 rink back up. And 52 days after the failure, we had 1 sheet, the NHL sheet, back up in on a temporary chiller. That chiller is being rented, and rental chillers that come available for delivery are only of a size that they could do 1 of the 2 sheets. But as a result of that work, we then moved forward to look at what we were facing in terms of the existing system. It's about 22 years old, And as we got into more exploration work, as shown in the center and the left photos, we began to better appreciate how severe the damage was to the internal parts of the system of the refrigeration plant. Pictured on the right there is the smaller temporary chiller that we brought in to keep the ice for the NHL rink, which is in operation today, and we're continuing to make use of that to have partial use of the facility. Better a partial shutdown than a total shutdown in the short term at least. We then had to go through and look at 3 different approaches that we could use for how to address this failed system. One of those would be to have a skid system that would be inside the building. One would be to have a skid system outside the building, and the third would be to have a replacement very similar to the original system. The systems become a little more difficult to build in at this point because when this building was originally constructed, this refrigeration plant was actually put in place inside the building before the roof was put over the top of the building. So we had to look at what the pluses and minuses would be cost-wise and response time-wise for these different alternatives. In order to evaluate those alternatives, we looked at these different criteria for what would impact the time frames and what would impact the dollar cost for the 3 different alternatives that we had to look for. And we wanted to strike a balance, obviously, between those sometimes competing considerations. Ultimately, the project selection process was to go with a existing system in-kind replacement. The system could not be repaired, in our opinion, in the opinion of the consultants that we retained, and would need to be replaced, but we were able, with more work and more research, to figure out a way to do that without any major modifications to the building. So that then moved that to quite a bit more feasible to do. And we have selected the contractor. We've issued a notice to proceed. That was 148 days after the initial failure occurred. We issued that notice to proceed, and that contractor has now got work underway. The financial aspects of this project are pretty considerable, especially as an emergency project. But we have had expenses related to renting the temporary chiller as well as the paying for the permanent solution. You can see here we have a total estimated project budget of $1.8 million. Of that amount, we have been working with our insurance carrier on an insurance claim, and we are comfortable that the current estimate for insurance proceeds is standing at $1.1 million. And I say it that way because the forensic analysis of the failed equipment on the part of the insurance carrier is still ongoing. And it is possible that that amount will increase, but we're comfortable at that level. But that still leaves a pretty significant gap that we have to cover that was not anticipated, not budgeted for, because it's an equipment failure situation. We have identified a project that's in our adopted CIP from the general funds of the city, the property tax funded portion of the CIP, that while not ideal, will at least be able to get us to a point where we can pay for the gap between the amount of money that we'll get from the insurance proceeds and the cost of the project. And with that, staff's recommendation is that the City Council ratify the City Manager's exigency approval of the permanent chiller replacement for the Ice Center, authorize the use of AMS for temporary chiller replacement for up to 7 months, approve the project budget, authorize the bonding resolution, authorize the necessary budget adjustments and necessary signatures. I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Any questions at this point? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. Just for the public's sake, and I know the numbers were higher than most people recognized, what's the number of gates that come through that door every year? Do you remember? I know we have former council member Greg Ferris that can probably recite that from memory. Greg, do you know what the gate count is on that center?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Greg Ferris. I work with the contractor that you have on that facility. I believe last year, and Rob Boyle's here, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was around 156,000. Is that 161,000 people went through that. I think one of the other things to consider too is that 2 years ago they brought a big ice show into town. That would not be available without the ice center. That's scheduled again to come. It brings millions of dollars in the community. So there's really more than just those 160,000 people that go through the gate that use the facility.
Greg, thank you.
If I can add to that, it's a regional attraction. You have both hockey and figure skating that bring people in from all across the Midwest.
I just wanted to share for those, it is a big investment, but an important investment that does a lot more in our community, as mentioned, than just people wanting to go and ice skate on an afternoon. And so we appreciate it, and thank you, Mr. Ferris, for sharing that and for all you do out there and helping in our community in that respect. And so we're very appreciative. If there's no other questions, then I would move that we take the staff recommended action.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
Approval for Mayor Jeff Longwell to travel to Jacksonville, Florida, January 9th through the 13th, 2019, to attend the commissioning of the USS Wichita.
I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to approve the travel.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
Approval for Council Member Brian Fry and Jeff Blueball to travel to Jacksonville, Florida, January 11th through the 13th, 2019, to attend the commissioning of the USS Wichita.
I would move that we approve those travel expenses.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
Selection of candidate to fill the vacancy in City Council District 2.
Okay. Let me just share with the public at this point how this process is going to work and share a little bit of background information. And this is a process that we have used in the past. And so when the vacancy came about by Councilmember Meitzner winning an election, we had utilized an old process that allowed us to take applications for that seat. We directed those applications to the District Advisory Board, as we've done in the past. The District Advisory Board interviewed the applicants and narrowed the list of applicants down to 5. After that list of applicants was narrowed to 5, then the council members themselves, at least the voting ones in this case, not Councilmember Meitzner, each interviewed every single applicant. And so we've had great length and opportunity to hear from each applicant, but we're also going to hear from each applicant at this point and give them up to 3 minutes to share some obviously brief remarks with us. After that, each applicant has had the opportunity to share remarks. We will bring any discussion back to the bench at that point in time, and we have ballots provided to us to vote on the difficult task of replacing Councilmember Meitzner. And so at this point in time, we have a list of each applicant. It's basically in alphabetical order. And so, Madam Clerk, you want to call up the applicants, or do you have that list?
I do have that list. The first one would be David Babich.
And if you can set the timers to 3 minutes.
Mayor, Councilman, David Babish. My wife Joyce and I have lived in Willow Bend for the past 22 years. We are parents to a daughter, Angie Prather, and 2 sons, Michael and Bradley. They all graduated from Wichita State University and now reside and work in Wichita. So I'm just going to go briefly over the city and the neighborhood and the church where I have been active that would prepare me for the awesome task of replacing Councilman Meichner. Councilman Pisciotti appointed me to the Board of Zoning Appeals first, and then later when the district advisory boards were formed, he appointed me to the district advisory board. Manager Layton appointed me to a citizens committee to interview the 4 finalists for Public Works Director, whereupon we suggested Alan King, and we've been real pleased with his performance. That he came from Broomfield, Colorado, where they have a lot of cold and hot, and he brought a scientific way to fix streets that we're all enjoying now. So, and then later, Councilman Meichner appointed me to his district advisory board, and then I was appointed to the Community Development Block Grant Committee, which applicants for federal resources that the city has come before us, and we determine who will get those funds. So the YMCA has the after-school program, the YWCA, St. Anthony Family Center, and Harbor House treat victims of domestic violence services, and some housing funds. And one of the times that I was on there, Big Brothers and Big Sisters was left off the list, and Councilman Meichner and Mayor Longwell, we got together and came up with a way to include them in the funds, and they have been on ever since. And then Councilman Meichner appointed me to the library board, which I serve currently. In my neighborhood in Willow Bend, I was president for 2 years and maintenance chief for at least 8 years. We installed playground equipment, restored stone, lawn, and irrigation to Lake Jasmine on Rock Road, and installed lighting to trees and entrance monuments. But most of all, proud of we worked with the golf course to provide effluent water to water our common area, because the golf course made arrangements with Park City to bring effluent water clear down to Willow Bend, and then we got it from the golf course, and we use that effluent over 85% of the common area, up to 10 million gallons a year, and we're not charged for that water because we exchanged duties on who maintained Rock Road. There's an east side and west side.
Your time's expired.
Okay. I appreciate your consideration for the replacement. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next applicant.
Marcy Gregory.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council persons. I am ecstatic to be in front of you this morning. My name is Marcy Gregory. I shared with a lot of you in my conversations. Let me begin by saying I think it's a true blessing for this city that we've got the amazing slate of candidates with good, strong experience and that are willing to step forward and serve, and I'm honored and very grateful to be a part of that. In my conversations with some of you, I expressed that my frustration with a lot of folks, they will tell you that they're very for progress. And then when you consider a project coming to town and begin planning and preparing for it, a lot of people don't want it in their own backyards. And that's been a frustration for me. But I've got a proven track record of not only being responsive to the people of the city I've served, and being very pro-progress, working very hard to bring the projects that they've said that they wanted into our town, and I'm very proud of that. Again, in my conversations with some of you, it came up that there was concern about whether I could shift gears and step out of the spotlight from being mayor to being a council person, and I want to emphasize to all of you, and to all of you as well, I am absolutely a team player. I always have been a team player. I don't have a great deal of ego. I really don't care who gets credit for the project. I just want to work really hard to bring good things to the people in this great city. And I would be very happy to be able to do that for the city of Wichita. Not having ego, I do have other qualities that I want to emphasize. I have a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm for this great city. And I would love to be able to go to work, put that energy and enthusiasm for the city to work for the people in this area. I love living in Wichita. I know most of us could live anywhere we want to. I love being in Wichita. I love the history. I love the entrepreneurial spirit. And I applaud you all for your service to our great city. I thank you for your time and your consideration, and say God bless you to all of you for your service to the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next applicant.
Daniel Rutherford.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Daniel Rutherford. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you about what I have to offer the city in the role of the District 2 councilman. I am passionate about the success of Wichita, and I've been inspired by the many things this city council has accomplished. I desire to be a part of the team, and I do stress team, that keeps this momentum going. I have worked in the aerospace industry as a technical leader for 12 years. In that time, I have worked with foreign civil aviation authorities as an FAA representative, which has given me intergovernmental experience at an international level that can also be applied to the relationship between the city and the county governments. More importantly, my professional experience has given me the ability to team build and execute effectively. Today, we stand at a crossroads of how to move forward to develop this city. The opportunity is in front of us to bring Wichita into the 21st century with the addition of a state-of-the-art multi-sport complex and the potential for bringing in new theater, art, and convention business with the upcoming discussions surrounding Century 2. We also face risk of not acting fast enough or not choosing the correct path forward to retain our young, educated workforce. We must choose to embrace and focus on the generation looking to plant roots and start families. As the Chung Report has recently pointed out, we have an exodus of educated millennial talent. As the only candidate that is a member of this generation, I am uniquely qualified in understanding many of its motivations. I have 3 aggressive goals that I'd like to achieve as part of the council. 1, arrival at an equitable master aquatics plan. Swimming is more than just a recreation. It is a life-saving skill that everyone needs to learn. Every community deserves access to a pool. 2, working toward a progressive solution for Century 2. We know that the status quo does not enable a thriving theater and arts district, and the city is losing increasing amounts of transient business as a result. 3, investment along the river. Wichita has outspent 5-to-1 on public and private capital investments by other mid-major cities. It is paramount that we develop areas of culture, business, and entertainment along our prominent riverfront if we wish to compete with these cities. I promise to be a moral and servant leader that embodies transparency, integrity, commitment, and empathy. This leadership style is that of humbling oneself in the service of others. Our citizens have a desire for progressive, transparent local government, and I believe I have the tool set to answer that call. I am your candidate. I am passionate about this city and this community and have experience in managing decisions to get things done. I am the face that will help City Council establish a youthful leadership that encourages young professionals to buy into the city's future and settle in. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next speaker. Next applicant.
Charles Schmidt.
Mayor and Council, my name is Chuck Schmidt. 2 people call me Charles, my mom and my wife when I'm in trouble. So I'm generally known as Chuck, and I don't think I'm in trouble right now, not yet. Thank you, Mayor and Council members, for this process. I've done this before in some of my leadership positions, and I think it's been a very good process. My name is Chuck Schmidt. I've been a superintendent of schools for 14 years. I'm relatively new to this community. However, in those 14 years and in other years before I was a superintendent, I've lived in 4 different communities. I've always been very engaged in civic affairs, working with city councils, doing joint projects with them, many of the same kinds of things that you're talking about in these council meetings: construction delivery, architectural firms, industrial revenue bonds, community improvement districts, historic preservation. We've done all those sorts of things. One of the things that I think a quality that I have learned and have developed over those years is the ability the ability to build consensus for an issue. And the way you do that is by listening. You start with the facts, and you work your way out from there in common agreement with others. But you've got to, first of all, center on the facts. One of the other things that I have as a quality, I think, is the time. I'm retired. I have the time to devote to this, air quotes, part-time job, as you've all mentioned, which takes a lot of time. I love going out into the community, talking to people. I'm a very conversational person, and I would enjoy attending those district and community-wide events to do that. And finally, it was mentioned in one of our interviews, are you ready to take the criticism that comes? As you know, in your position, people don't usually call you up and tell you what a great job you're doing. I've been in one of those high-profile positions for 14 years, and I had the same thing. They usually call if they have a complaint, and I've learned how to deal with that, and the way you deal with that is you don't take it personally. You simply do what you believe is best. And finally, if I'm fortunate enough to be selected, my first item of business would be to consult with Councilman Fry about a suit that would be appropriate for the occasion. And my last and probably most important qualifying item is the fact that with Councilman Meisner leaving, you need someone with a similar hairstyle.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next applicant.
Becky Tuttle.
Good morning. I'm Becky Tuttle, and I'm the current chair of District Advisory Board 2. I come here before you today hoping to be appointed for District 2 City Council because I feel that I am truly qualified for the position and have demonstrated successes with making Wichita a better place to live, learn, earn, play, and pray. Just a few highlights I'd like to point out are leading the efforts to have Wichita become smoke-free, which was the catalyst for the rest of our state to become smoke-free. Support for the Wichita Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plans and the Wichita Wayfinding Plan, including finding funding to help support the implementation of those plans. Efforts to identify and address Wichita's food deserts and increasing access to healthy foods that also spur our local food economy, which is a $1 billion annual industry. I've been instrumental in helping to plan and seek funding for Open Streets ICT and the implementation of Bike Share ICT, both that bring people down to our city's core and increase tax revenue. Vote Like a Mother was another project that I was involved with, which helped citizens to participate in their most basic right, the right to vote, and everyone's favorite, Walk Along Well. During my interview with the City Council and Mayor, I was asked a question of what is my vision for Wichita in the next 10 years, and quite frankly, I did not answer the question well because my mind was flooded with so many opportunities and challenges of how the city should spend their time and treasure. But on further consideration, I really distilled it down to a vision for 10 years from now would be that the students who are in our middle schools, in our high schools, are still here. They're living in our community because they're tethered here because of great jobs with a diversified economy using skills that they've acquired in our institutions of higher learning. Safe and healthy communities do not and will not happen by accident. And one of the core functions of any government agency is to ensure that all of our residents have the ability to live well. I want those students who are still here in 10 years to turn on the water and to have abundant, safe, clean water. I want them to engage in cultural activities for all. When they travel around our community, I want them to have options such as walking, biking, and transit on infrastructure that's well maintained, and heaven forbid if they have an emergency, to be able to call our city's finest police and fire department and have well-trained, quick responses. Finally, I want them to be authentically heard and engaged now in the process and not wait 10 years from now to see what we need our young leaders to stay here. If appointed, my first priority will be to learn what my strengths and attributes would be to augment the City Council and the tremendous momentum that has been made in the last 5 years. Hard decisions will have to be made, and I feel that I have the support, the wherewithal, and the connections to be an effective leader to keep the foot on the gas pedal towards progress in Wichita. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you for your time and attention, and good luck in the process.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the applicants that have cared enough to put their name in the hat for an opportunity to represent this great city. I will remind the public that this council has had opportunity in depth to interview each of the applicants that are going to fill this spot. As we know in our democracy, typically when we're selecting our elected leaders, we get to do so from the privacy of a voting booth, but that's not the case with the way that we select today. We are going to do so in a very public fashion. With that being said, as I mentioned, we've had the opportunity to interview each of these applicants in depth. I don't believe it's my role or responsibility to lobby for any one individual applicant. We've each had an opportunity to have great discussions in depth. We have, I believe, five ballots with each applicant's name on it that we will each individually vote for the replacement. And the clerk will collect the ballots after each vote and read the ballot. It will require 4 votes to fill the seat. We did pass an ordinance several years ago after so many ties. If there's happens to be a 3-3 tie, because Member Meitzner does not get to vote on this, we have decided to go to a coin flip. Just to let people know the rules. But again, let me say thank you to a well-qualified group of applicants that all could do an outstanding job, and so it doesn't make our decision any easier. But I'm at this point going to ask us to simply cast our ballots and would encourage us not to lobby for any or campaign for any one individual applicant. Are there any questions at this point? Write your casting your vote. And Madam Clerk, I'll ask you to collect these.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and read each ballot individually. Mayor Longwell selected Becky Tuttle. Vice Mayor Blueball selected Becky Tuttle. Councilmember Brandon Johnson selected Becky Tuttle. Councilmember Brian Fry selected Marcy Gregory. Councilmember James Clendenin selected Becky Tuttle. And Councilmember Cindy Claycomb selected Becky Tuttle.
So with that recording, I'm going to make a motion pursuant to section 2.04.040 of the City Code. I move that the City Council appointment of Becky Tuttle to serve the District 2 council member to fill the unexpired term of Councilmember Pete Meitzner for a term commencing January 15th of 2019 and ending January 13th of 2020. We have a motion and a second. Cast your vote. And that's just a legal motion that we have to make, and the motion passes 6-0. Obviously, Councilmember Meitzner does not get a vote. Congratulations, Becky Tuttle. You will be sworn in next week. And again, thank you to all of the very qualified applicants for putting yourself out there. Look forward to what next year has to offer. Madam Clerk, next item.
Councilmember appointments and comments.
Any appointments today? I think we've made most of our comments. We're all commented out. I will say before we adjourn that we also have Commissioner Michael O'Donnell that has joined us today, I'm sure, to celebrate Councilmember Meissner's leaving of this body and to welcome him across the street. Thank you for being here today. If there's no other comments, I would move that we adjourn today's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote.
My final action is to...
That's perfect. That is perfect.
Keep it going, baby.